delighted and honored to be introducing to you Marilyn, my good friend Marilyn Gugliucci. I will read her bio in a second, but I'm also grateful before I do so to Clay for being one of the big supporters of Marilyn, and she was one of the first people he recommended that I talked to when I was designing the Center for Global Humanities. So thank you, Clay. Huh?
Take a bow.
Yeah. So Dr. Marilyn Gugliucci.
Why don't you shorten that? You could shorten that. Go ahead.
Okay. Is a director of geriatrics, education and research at the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine, and coordinates with the colleges of arts and science, health professions, and pharmacy to strategically develop projects on aging across the university and within Maine. She attained a PhD in gerontology and completed an NIH-funded postdoctoral geriatrics research fellowship at Boston University. Her latest research project, now a UNICOM signature program, admits medical students into nursing homes to live the life of an elder resident for 2 weeks. And you may have, some of you, if you are avid readers of the New York Times, you may recall that the New York Times devoted a full-page article to this program that's mentioned here. So it was an incredible feat for all of us, I mean, for the Center for Global Humanities and for the University of New England. Dr. Gugliucci is a fellow of the American Geriatric Society, the Gerontology Society of America, and the Association for Gerontology in Higher Education. She serves on the National GSA and AGHE executive boards, and in June 2008 began a 2-year term as president of AGHE, which is the gerontology, which is the American American Geriatric? AGI?
It's the Association for Gerontology in Higher Education. Okay.
Although not a nurse, she has attained mentor status within the Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nursing for the Hartford Foundation-funded Geriatric Nursing Leadership Academy, and mentored the project focused on reducing medical errors in care of older adults entitled the Always Never Care Model. In Maine, Dr. Gugliucci is on a number of boards for such organizations as the Maine Legal Services for the Elderly, Office of Elder Services, Southern Maine Agency on Aging, St. Andre Healthcare Facility, and serves as vice president for the Maine Gerontological Society. For the past 20 years, she has been working with colleagues locally, nationally, and more recently internationally, Japan and India, for example, on elder-related issues and training for health practitioners. Dr. Gugliucci is widely known for her membership in national research fellowships for medical students and junior faculty. Additionally, Dr. Gugliucci chaired the establishment of minimum geriatrics curricular guidelines for colleges of osteopathic medicine, published in 2009, this year, and is co-chairing a 16-member national task force to establish and publish geriatrics gerontology curricular guidelines for all health professions programs. Her dream for UNE is to establish with her colleagues an UNE Institute for Optimal Aging, and I'm definitely hoping to be a member of that organization, you know, as I think all of us should, because I think it's inevitable for some of us anyway, for those of us who are aging faster than others. And it's also an incredible honor, and to be hosting, together with Dr. Marilyn Gugliucci, the author of the book which has been assigned for today's event, which is Learning to be Old, Gender, Culture, and Aging, Margaret Cruikshank, and she's with us tonight. And her bio is in the book. She is a native of northern Minnesota, taught English and gay and lesbian studies for many years at City College of San Francisco. She now teaches women's studies at the University of Maine, where she's also a faculty associate at the Center on Aging. She lives in a small coastal village in eastern Maine. Are you still living there? Dr. Cruikshank's books include Macaulay, Lesbian Studies, and the Gay and Lesbian Liberation Movement. Her anthology of literature about aging, Figures with Reality, grew out of graduate studies in gerontology at San Francisco State University. Her numerous articles cover many subjects. Learning to be Old is not a blueprint for late life, but its author plans to follow its less taxing recommendations. So please help me in welcoming. Please help me in welcoming both the speaker and the author.
Hello. I'm sorry you had to sit through all of that. It's kind of the formality of academia, and I'm much more informal than that. So what's going to happen today was when Anwar talked with me about this and he said, you have to find a book. I'm like, I can do better than that. I can find the author. So I asked Peg, we're informal, we're friends, to come along. And what's going to happen tonight is I'll probably present the first 40 minutes, something like that. And then Peg will follow up with that next stage of where we're moving in this talk for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to have discussion, which you don't want to miss. I don't care how good the food is, it's going to have to wait. So, but we're going to change the world tonight. And as a matter of fact, just so you know, my goal in life is to change the world. And oftentimes people laugh at me, and all I need to do is get one of you to think differently, more positively about aging, and I've accomplished my goal, because then you'll share that with someone else. And so Anwar mentioned, this is the New York Times article, started this in 2005. I have to tell you, I was totally naive what it meant to be in the New York Times. I had no idea. And Anwar's, a full-page article on learning by living. I admit medical students into nursing homes to live the life of elder residents. We are the first medical school in the country to be doing this. They go in with a diagnosis. They experience eating pureed foods, being bathed, being toileted, the whole 9 yards. If you don't think these future physicians are coming out changed, then let me tell you, it is mind-boggling. And the best part about this, and of course this tells you something about me, I don't care if they're toileted or not. What I care about is at the end of this experience, the diseases of old age, the chronological age melts away. And these students connect heart to heart with older adults, create friendships. The men are crying when they leave because they're leaving their friends. It's an ethnographic research project. It's academically sound. We gather all the data. And Kathleen Tattersall is helping me create, working with some people to create a documentary on this project. And we passed the first hurdle, and there's a group in New York that's going to be working with us, and so we're hoping this comes out and we can spread the word. So this summer, 3 students will be living in nursing homes and being filmed day in and day out. So here we have for tonight, the goal here is to raise aging consciousness. It's very simple. And to see how that applies to our own lives as well as globally, real and metaphorically. This is not all hands-on stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on in aging that's kind of under the wire that people aren't really picking up. So some of the highlights, we're going to look at societal images and influence, aging complexities, the role of critical thinking and consciousness, and then we're going to move into changes that can affect the field of aging. So that's kind of, you like the old picture, the old pump? Anybody remember those? So here's the problem statement. Remember this, we're doing the art, social construction, and globalization. Despite the growing older adult population, societies fail to grasp the concepts and constructs associated with age and aging. I will point that out to you as we go through. We have this burgeoning field of older adults, and people aren't really paying attention to what that actually means. So some of the key points is that in the U.S., we have shortages of healthcare providers and social systems for older adults. We're just not keeping up. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And the critical part about this, and in my work with the people in Japan and India, they're looking to us for leadership. And the people that we're working with, my colleagues, and I have some examples as we go through, are entrenched. They've been co-opted. And I don't want to say any more about that. I will get to that later. But it's an incredible thing to have people from other countries look to us for leadership about aging, and I'm saying, you don't want to look here. We've got a lot of work to do. So how do we raise that consciousness so eventually we can be leaders in the field and help other countries? It's interesting stuff. So just so that we're all on the same page, don't you love her? That's actually A.T. still up there surfing, who is the father of osteopathic medicine. But right now, we have about 330 older adult people in their 65 turning 65 every hour. What I want you to pay attention to is in January 2011, when the baby boomers come around, 10,000 a day for the next 20 years. I mean, I was one of those baby boomers that had split sessions in school. You know, what are they going to do, split sessions in nursing homes? I mean, how are we going to do this? So that's an incredible number. Now here, the fastest growing segment is the 85-plus-year-old, up 400%. It is up 400% in the United States since 1966. It is up 400% in third world countries since 1990. We're talking 19 years.
Whoa.
This is a lot of growth, you know? So here we have centenarian growth. Don't you love her? Now, all I really want to say about this is that Willard Scott, remember he used to be on TV? So, oh, we had seven older, is he still?
Yeah.
You know, honest God, between 2007, between 1995 and 2007, we went up by almost 20,000. But in 10 years, 2040 to 2050, we're going to go up by 250 plus thousand. You know how long he would have to stay on TV mentioning names every day? You know? And if the guy lived that long, so be it. You know, we'll let him. But here, 30% of the centenarians today are living alone. And that's, or living independently. And that's in 2002. So that's the most up-to-date number I could get. But think about how many are going to be living on their own later on. And then we have rurality issues to deal with, there's transportation, there's a ton of issues around this. So here we have aging demographics. Now think about this. 50% of 65-year-olds in Maine are living with a parent. Okay, so are the 65-year-olds living with a parent, or is the parent living with the 65-year-old? You tell me. What do you think? We don't know. They didn't tell us that. We have no idea. I can't find it out. Vermont, 7 years, went up 60% in the 65-plus-year-old. How many do you think, what percentage of older adults now are living in nursing homes? What percent? Medical students guess about 60%. What do you think? 5%? 40%? Is that what I heard?
What age are you for cutoff, Dr. Gugliucci?
I'm not using 65 plus. 65 plus. So in Maine and also nationally, these are the percentages of people that are living in nursing homes. It does average out to 5%. So Clay, you get a gold star. 5% of older adults are living in nursing homes. So that leaves a whole lot of older adults that are out there in the community. And well, let me hold that too. Okay. So this whole piece, when I ask medical students, and they say 60% are living in nursing homes, think about that image. I mean, that they see older adults as being institutionalized. That's the word. And as a matter of fact, the way the Learning by Living project came about was I taught in the medical school. I had a first-year medical student come to my office afterwards. They call me Dr. G. Said, Dr. G, I want to learn how to speak with institutionalized elders. And I'm looking at her, and the first thing I'm thinking is, I don't even use the word institutionalized, so that's interesting to me. And I thought, well, you would speak with them as you would any adult. Now I knew this is a teachable moment, and if I say something as innocuous as that, it's not going to get anywhere. And that's when I said, well, would you live in a nursing home for 2 weeks? I have no idea where it came from. I was possessed. There was this pregnant pause. Her eyes got huge, and then she said yes. So Maine is the oldest state, average age 41. Geriatrician statistics, there's a lot on here, but let me just tell you, we don't have enough geriatricians. We need about 14,000 right now. We only have about 7,000. We keep losing them. Some of them have certificates of added qualifications that they're not renewing. We're not filling our residency programs, our fellowship programs in geriatrics, which means they finish 4 years of medical school, they then have 3 years of residency, and then they stay on for 1 extra year in geriatrics. They're not staying for the extra year. They're not interested. We really need to prepare our primary care physicians to take care of older adults because we don't have enough geriatricians. So at this point, there's one for every 2,500 older adults. That's what OA is. Okay? Now, what's interesting, in a study of 12,000 physicians in 2002, people that were geriatricians had the highest satisfaction rate out of all the physician specialties. But they're also the lowest paid. So a physician friend of mine who's a geriatrician in the state, her husband makes $1,500 in 15 minutes. She makes $35 an hour. Now, because her husband makes $1,500 every 15 minutes, that she can make $35 an hour. But you can see where becoming a geriatrician is not a lucrative thing. What is really cool about geriatrics is that if you like a good mystery, this is the profession to be in. Tests don't diagnose. Tests might confirm, but it's not a high tech, it's more high touch. And so it really takes a special person to be a geriatrician or to work with older adults. So here, grandparenting. Oftentimes I have students in any of the health professions, Dr. G, I want to work with kids, that's it. Social work, just kids, medical, pediatrician. Well, the truth is that 1 in 18 children are being raised by their grandparents right now. You're going to see grandparents in the office. You're going to be working with them no matter what field you are in the health professions. So, and this is a 30% increase since 1990, and this is the statistic from 2000. So I would bet that number already went up. And you can imagine if a child is being raised by their grandparent, that there's some probably pretty significant issues going on in the family, which probably means that the child even needs more support services. So here we have statistics are like bikinis. What they reveal is intriguing, but what they conceal is critical. So don't think about that too much, please. But what happens, the reason why I put this up there is that there's all sorts of ways of looking at numbers. That number, about 50% of those 65 and older are living with a parent in Maine. We don't know if it's the elder living with the child or the adult child living with the older adult. We just don't know. And so when you see numbers, please be critical, be thoughtful about them, and just don't believe everything you read. That's the story there. So we got everybody on the same page. You see that we have this age wave coming. We've got a lot of older adults. Things are happening, right? Well, now, let's go to the profession and look at some key definitions. Gerontology and geriatrics. Do you know what the definition of gerontology is? Take a guess. Study of aging. You get a gold star. So this is Eli Metchnikoff, 1903. GSA, that's the Gerontological Society of America, that started in 1950. That was our first organization around the study of aging. Now, the scientific study of old age, geron, old, ology, study of, right? Well, in the organization that I'm president of, the Association for Gerontology in Higher Education, this is what we use. The study of the aging process from midlife through to late life. It's not static. You don't wake up one morning and all of a sudden you're old. It happens over time. It's the study of physical, mental, and social changes. There is a connection between not only what's happening with you and with you in society and the programs that come of that, but it's also connected with your health and well-being. And I'll show you when we look at the geriatrics definition what that's about. So AARP, prime example, they're looking at the changes in society resulting from our aging population. And then they create policies and programs around that. So that's gerontology in its broadest sense. Gives you a lot of latitude. What is happening, and through this definition, but before I put it up, what is geriatrics? Do you know? Definition of geriatrics. I gave you a hint before about pediatrics. Medical. The medicine of old age. That work? So this again, I'm going to show you the Association for Gerontology in Higher Ed, the study of health and disease in later life, the comprehensive health care of older adults. So here we have that physical, mental, social you know, that whole bit. So we're kind of folding over to gerontology. This is cool, the well-being of their informal caregivers. Now, Dr. Butler, who's 85 years old, uses this definition. The Association for Gerontology uses this definition. So now what I want to know is, do these two terms equate? Can you call older adults the geriatric population? Does that fit? Does it work? We got some, works? My grandmother's part of the geriatric population. Work? It really doesn't. There was a red line that went through there. Don't miss that red line. The truth of the matter is that these people are the survivors. And I will elucidate more about this red mark. Hang on. Here we go. So Ignatz, my buddy, 1909, he was the one that really coined the term geriatrics. And then the mother of geriatrics came about in 1935, Dr. Marjorie Warren. Now this is out of Merriam-Webster's dictionary in 2002. The Yagi definition is from 2001. So here we have geriatric, adjective relating to geriatrics. Don't you love when they use the name in the definition? Doesn't tell you a thing. Practice geriatric department, a geriatric ward, relating to affecting or being aged individuals, geriatric population in a nursing home, institution, geriatric depression, geriatric animals. So if there is anybody here who is a geriatric nurse practitioner, what does it say about them? They're an old nurse practitioner, right. We oftentimes use the word geriatric as a noun, and it really is an adjective. So even when I got my position, I'm the director of geriatric education and research, and I said to my boss, you got to put an S on that, you know, because I'm not about old education. I'm about education about geriatrics. So here, 2009, remember the Yagi definition, comprehensive health care of older adults, 2001. 2009, Random House and the American Heritage, both 2009, I just kind of compressed them. It's a noun. The branch of medicine dealing with diseases, debilities, and care of aged persons. The study of the physical processes and problems, you're getting my slant, of aging. And they put gerontology in there? I don't like that. Diagnosis and treatment of diseases and problems specific to age. Slang, the old person and aged person. How do you think I feel about this? Look at this face. Do you think I'm happy about this? You know, this whole society, disease decline, right? And in 2009, we're trying, you know, here we are, this little podunk organization, national organization, trying to move forward comprehensive health care of older adults, looking at positive factors on aging. And then we have these powerhouses coming in and saying this is the way it is. And the American Geriatric Society came out in 1942, and they're working hard on this as well. So, this is a geriatric squirrel. She's got little slippers, little pearls, little walker. Okay. For the students in the class, so if you two don't mind getting together for this, and some of you have done this, but if you can bear with me, because I think it's important for the students. Have you all ever arm wrestled? You know how to arm wrestle. You're not going to arm wrestle. Have you ever thumb wrestled? Yes. Cool. Would you mind standing up? Is this? I'm ambidextrous. If you wouldn't mind standing up. What is the object of thumb wrestling? Do you know? Pin the other person's thumb. She's not even letting me do that. You're supposed to try to pin the other person's thumb. Okay? So, what is going to happen? I don't care if you do, look at this, look at this. Okay, I don't care if you do, wait, hang on there. If you do 1, 2, 3, 4, I declare a thumb war. I don't care if you do that. You are going to have 15 seconds to thumb wrestle. And while you thumb wrestle, she's incredible. Who's going to be her partner? You better watch out if she's your partner.
You win.
What? What's going to happen? You're going to thumb wrestle for 15 seconds. The object, like you said, is to pin the other person's thumb. The goal is to get as many pins as you possibly can in 15 seconds, so be sure you count, okay? And it would be really nice if you gave it a try, And if you don't, that's okay, but I definitely want the students to do it, all right? So find a partner. Everybody, anybody need remedial help with thumb wrestling? You can just kind of turn right around there. Okay. Let's do it. Okay. All right, everybody ready? Go. 15 seconds. Oh, let me get that straight out. Okay. All right. Wait. You got to hold this way. This way. Grab fingers that way. And then try to, okay? Okay, and stop. How many got one pin? How many got two? How many got three? Oh, you got three? Oh, good. Oh, okay. Oh, see? Good. How many got 6? 7? What was the highest that you got?
25.
Did you each get 25 or just one of you?
She got 25.
What'd you get?
0.
0. Okay, the object is to pin the other person's thumb. The goal, get as many pins as you possibly can. So obviously, did he just lay down and play dead? Okay, so what it is I pin Shannon, she pins me. I pin her, she pins me. I pin her, she pins me. Right? Is that what you did? Women power. Don't you love this, Peg? She got to get the 25 pins. So let me tell you, what does this have to do with aging? Bear with me.
It's hard to do when you have arthritis.
It is hard to do when you have arthritis. You didn't have to do it. Thumb wrestling. How was thumb wrestling constructed? What is fun about thumb wrestling? It's silly, it's competition. When you smash the other person's thumb, it feels really good. I mean, I couldn't even, I'm just standing here trying to demonstrate, you know. And oftentimes when I show, you know, I pin you, you pin me, and I choose somebody new, they don't even let me pick my thumb up to say, you're supposed to let me pin you. You know, the medical students are like, oh, you cheated. That's no fun. It's like, well, thumb wrestling was socially constructed. Berger and Luckman, 1966. Social construction of reality. Do you think that there was a whole lot of NIH money that went into thumb wrestling to create thumb wrestling? Yeah, probably, yeah. That wasn't a good example. Don't you think it was probably like 2 kids or 2 people? They were bored. They're sitting in the back of a car. They said, oh, this sounds like fun. Let's do it. Right? And then all of a sudden, thumb wrestling starts. Then they show their friends. And their friends start doing it. And I don't know when it started. I couldn't find the history of thumb wrestling. But you knew what it was, or most of you did. And you knew that it was set up to be competitive. Except these 2 guys, how'd you get so smart? Oh, good. It's so rare for that to happen because people get co-opted by what's happening in our society and how things were constructed. So thumb wrestling is constructed to be competitive. It's really hard to think outside of the box and say, oh, we're supposed to collaborate on this. It doesn't happen. Well, what is very interesting about this? Pay attention. Aging, watch my lips. Aging was socially constructed. Somehow, Eli got in there with Ignatz and decided that this is what gerontology, geriatrics is going to be about. Somehow, through our society, we picked up this disease decline model, right? What are the images of older adults? What are the ones that you mostly think of? If you think about aging, what do you think of? Slow movement, can't drive. What else? Forgetful. Wily. Good for you. I knew that was coming from you. Right? So is there anything about aging, and I know from my good friend Steve here that he is not looking forward to it one iota. Not at all. This gentleman has been totally co-opted by society, and I've been working on him ever since, and it's not working. So do we all age the same? This is, you're deliberately putting yourself at risk of ill health by being over 65. Do we all age the same? Whoa, okay. Do we all age the same? Dr. Weaver will know this. Do we all age the same? Chronologically we do, right? Each year we get a year older. There's senescence that you're talking about. So the first one is just chronological age. We do all age the same. What happens in our society, though, is that we're using the term aging in place of senescence. And senescence is that organic or biologic process, the whole physiology of what's happening in your body. And in that way, we all age differently. But chronologically, we all age the same. So here are two other terms that are used in the aging field. We have usual aging and normal aging. Now, neither of these sound good to me either. So usual aging, I put adverse in quotations because that is the definition. The adverse was like, why couldn't you just say determined by a combination of environmental factors, lifestyle, and disease? I mean, the object is you're on this earth for a long time, you're bombarded by all of these things, and chances are, you know, you're going to age in the process, and how you age is affected by those. I don't know that adverse really needs to be there, but it was there, so I put it there. Now, normative aging is what medicine is based on. And these are values that are set up. You have people that present in a certain way. They create these charts. Many of them are created with younger adults. They're created by working with men as compared to women. They create these normative values, and then they apply them to every older adult that's out there. And I'll tell you something, if you've met one older adult, you've met one older adult. As we go through life, aging, people get more and more diverse. Blood ages faster than your lungs do. Your bones age at a different rate. It's different for every person, and yet we continue to apply this. So what I'm trying to figure out is how come we don't have individual aging? This is mine. You know, the aging process for a particular individual. Why is it that a person can't go in to a physician and say, you know, look at me. These are my conditions. What can you tell me about them? Rather than having to go to a book and say, okay, you're supposed to be this weight when you're this age. You're supposed to be eating this much food, you know, drinking this much fluid. You're supposed to have a bowel movement at least every 3 days. You know, it's like, no. So we are, okay, so I did talk about that already. I get carried away. Bear with me. Heterogeneity, how am I doing? Okay, I'm going to pass this. All right, so there is no set age a person becomes old. Which age do you mean? My anatomic, psychologic, physiologic, moral, or chronologic? It's a great slide. When I teach about age to the students, I say be sure you kind of factor in that biologic age, what's happening to the person's body. Look at their chronologic age, of course, see what age they are. Not that it really matters. You know, you look at one 85-year-old, you see somebody else. I've seen people in their 40s that look like they're 80, you know. But then ask them about their attitudinal age. What age do you feel? That is going to tell you a whole bunch. And oftentimes I bring older adults into class. You know, I get this guy, he's 90 years old. Jim, he's a great guy. Students say, you know, Jim, what age do you feel? He's like, I still feel like I'm like 40 or 50. You know, I'm 89, I got 4 acres, still drive my tractor, you know. Jim, when will you be old? When I can't have sex anymore, he says. So he has his lady friend with him. Annette, when will you be old? When Jim can't have sex anymore. Honest to God, it's what they said. We didn't plan it. So that's attitudinal age. And isn't that the age that maybe really should be factored in? What age do you feel? And do you feel that age because you think you're supposed to, because there's things happening in society and messages that you're getting bombarded with all the time And they're saying to you, when you have white hair, you're supposed to be acting a certain way. Your knees are supposed to hurt, your hips are supposed to hurt, these things are supposed, your skin's gonna sag. I don't know. Is that true though? Is that where the focus is? Is that what's important in life? Or is it really what's in your heart and what you convey and how you live? So, I don't know. So here we have social constructs intersect with aging theory. I didn't want you to think that this stuff just came out of my head. There is a reason for it. So the physician says, your tests are all normal except for the one growing old gracefully. I'm going to present to you two theories, the first two theories of successful aging. The first one is activity theory, and you'll see it's from 1949. 4 authors got together. Remember I said GSA, Gerontological Society, started in 1950. So in this theory, in order to age successfully, you had to maintain the activities of younger people. That's what you had to do. Their assumptions were the aged no longer occupy the respective position. Isn't that exciting? Retirees have no recognition function in society. Transitions from middle age to old age has no sanctioned activities to mediate this. We say, 65 is the year that people retire. There's nothing magical about that at all. But it does predict negative outcomes. And what it does is it's really created that there is no successful way to age because they're holding people back and measuring older adults against youthful aging. So when looking at this, and I went through, it's written in a book, Personal Involvement in Old Age, I think it was. I went through the book and I looked at the methodology, and that theory, which actually I found out isn't a theory, it's in the textbooks as a theory. It's an activity approach to aging. They only had a sample of 200 people. You can see they were healthy. They didn't differentiate between classes. They certainly didn't talk to older adults that were in nursing homes or compromised in any way. And they had no measures for quality of life or quality of relationships, and yet this is a successful theory. So here, the next theory of successful aging is disengagement theory. It says, on second thought, I'd probably like a nursing home. I don't know about you, but this is actually the first theory, real theory of successful aging, and it came out in 1960. Now, disengagement, does that sound positive to you? I mean, you're already seeing successful aging was withdrawal by the older adult from society, and society from the older adult. Okay? So the implication of this, it's inevitable, it's gradual, it's universal, they decided. Okay? If you really want to be a successful ager in the disengagement theory, what is the ultimate disengagement? Absolutely. So you die, and there you have it. You're a successful ager. But this piece about it being mutually gratifying, that's really questionable. So I went back and I read this book. They have a weird sense of humor, right? And what happened in this, withdrawal is a function necessary prepares for death. Okay. So 279 people. I said, oh, middle America. This is sounding a little bit better. When I read more closely, I found out that the sample was from Kansas City, which is the middle of America. Now, think about this. These theories are in textbooks. We teach them to our students. Aside from that, we've been co-opted by these. This is the social construction. This has actually been based on research. But nobody goes back to the books to read and look at the methodology flaws. They actually felt that they had to shorten the survey for people that were in their 80s and 90s, that they wouldn't have the stamina to get through the survey. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of methodology flaws. So here, out of these theories, this is a bumper sticker. Senior Campbell's new large type alphabet soup. These are two ways of identifying age that have come out of these theories. We have age differentiation, that your roles must fit a certain way, and age grading, where people are assigned roles based on who they are in society. So I did a talk to the Maine Retirees Association, Civic Center, 350 older adults. At the end, I had a line out the door. And these people are coming up to me saying, I'm 85 years old and I did this. I'm 78 and I did this. And I'm thinking, you know, it doesn't matter what your age is. There's one woman, 85 years old, her daughter won't let her go into the backyard and hang by her knees from the bar to play with her grandchildren. And I said, do you feel that you're capable of doing this? Have you lost, you know, your ability to be an adult? And she said, of course not. You know, I'm an adult, I can do that. I said, can you hang from your knees? She said, absolutely. I said, if you die, will you be upset? She said, not at all. It'll be fun. So I said, well, then go tell your daughter that you're okay and you can hang from your knees from the bar in the backyard and go play with your grandchildren. But can you imagine that an adult child, her daughter, said, you can't do this? To a woman who has lived life for 85 years? And as far as I was concerned, I mean, I know you can't tell at first blush, but she sure seemed with it. So here we have social clock. Medical students said she got stuck there. This is the age at which things are supposed to happen. You are not supposed to do this when you have white hair. But again, our society has said, you know, you are supposed to disengage. All right? You are supposed to prepare for death. Now, what's interesting about social clock, so you're supposed to be sitting in a rocker, knitting, those kinds of things. Bear with me. There's a guy standing on the end of the bed, his pants are down, and the woman's in the bed, and it says, I'm not applauding your erection, I'm turning off the lights. I put that up there because what happens with older adults is that right away people think they become asexual. And they don't, not at all. Some do. I mean, some have been asexual all their lives. You can't generalize. You just can't generalize. So here, this came out in 2008, the first article looking at sexuality in the holistic care of palliative care patients. Can you imagine that finally we have a group of authors that are starting to look at something that social construction said this is not even, shouldn't even be involved in palliative care at all, and that's comfort care, usually at the end of life. So activity theory, they tried to reformulate it. What happens is you have the formulation of a theory, then you have its ascendancy when it gets out there, and then usually reformulate it. Because once it gets out there, people start chewing on it, like, you know, the way I'm chewing on activity theory and disengagement theory. So these guys tried again. And they tried to prove that activity is directly related to life satisfaction. Here's this guy again trying to come down. In old age, they couldn't prove it. They couldn't prove it. And in the interest of time, there are assumptions here, but they actually tied positive self-concept with activity. And if you didn't have activity, then you couldn't feel good about yourself. And I have a hard time with that one. I don't think that's the way that works. So here we have a term. Any nurses here? Are you familiar with this term? You should. Your profession started it. Not that I should make you feel bad or anything. This is where a person will no longer do things either because somebody's doing it for them all the time, you know, and they just decide, I'm not going to do it anymore, or they really can't do it anymore because somebody has helped them to the point where they've forgotten how to do it. It happens with couples all the time. You know, trying to make a cup of coffee, and you're the one that always makes it, and your spouse never does, and you ask them to make the coffee. It's like, I'm on this retreat right now, and I have all these women saying, my husband, they couldn't get the kids on the school bus this morning. They missed the bus. You know, that's learned helplessness. So learned helplessness. So that teaches people that they can't do things. So here's another bumper sticker. I'm so old that whenever I eat out, they ask me for my money up front. So we have ageism, and this came out of Bob Butler, who I mentioned is a physician, and he's about 84, 85 right now. And he wrote the book, Why Survive? Growing Old in America in 1975. Now, the activity theory tried to be reformulated in 72. It didn't work, but ageism certainly came out of that when he realized, you know, when he saw what was happening with that theory and that they were trying to tie activity with self-concept. that the truth is that it really allows the younger generations to see themselves as different from the older generations. And it's really fun when you start reading things like Erickson or Kubler-Ross when they're in their older years or they're going through the dying process themselves, and then they write books about that as compared to what they wrote when they were in their 30s and 40s. Very different take on it. So here we have compassionate ageism. Now this is the mailman's here, and then the woman's kind of slipping the letter in the back of his drawers instead of in the mailbox. She knows exactly what she's doing. I asked her. She knows. But this is where you're assisting somebody with good intentions. And that time, you'll see that a lot in grocery stores or older adults are around, and then there'll be people who come by and say, can I help you with that? It happens with people with disabilities even. You know, do I offer to open the door? Do I not? But with older adults, they don't even question it. They just kind of get in their face and say, let me help you with that. Obviously, you're too old to take care of that yourself. So this compassionate ageism, it happens a lot. I see it with medical students, with older adults, or certified nursing assistants in nursing homes talking baby talk to people or calling them honey, dearie, those kinds of things. Their intentions are good. They really want to help. They want to be supportive. See, you were both, the two students, both in nursing homes, but the truth is it's still ageism. It's still inappropriate. How are we doing? Everybody doing all right? So we're wrapping up here. Successful aging, optimal aging. This one says, you're my second opinion. My television was my first. It's great. I don't know where we're moving here. I like the term optimal aging. I'm going to share some stuff with you about successful aging. I don't think that's the right term. I think that's something we can discuss. But let me share with you Madame Calment. You see, she died at the age of 122. Have you seen this when it happened in 1997? You might have missed it. Maybe you were too young to read the newspaper at that time. Her quote was, her famous quote, "I only have one wrinkle, and I'm sitting on it." Her famous quote. She ate 2 pounds of chocolate a week. She smoked to the age of 119. She actually stopped smoking because she was blind and she didn't want help lighting her cigarettes. But it is reported that her physician also asked her to stop smoking. And I say to physicians, what are you thinking? The woman's 119 years old and you're asking her to stop smoking. It just doesn't make sense. She walked all around her village at the age of 100 to thank everybody that came to her 100th birthday party. She was riding bikes up to the age of almost 110 when she first went into a nursing home. Now the really cool thing about her, and she's an outlier, not only in age, but she was known for her unflappability. If you can't do anything about it, why worry about it, is her quote. It's good advice. There was a lawyer, social construction, everybody has this notion about what lawyers are about. A lawyer, 45 years old, she's 90, the lawyer goes up to her and says, Madame Calment, I would like to buy your apartment. You can live in your apartment. I will pay you 2,500 francs, which at the time was about $450. You can live in your apartment, and then when you die, the apartment is mine. What is the assumption about a 90-year-old? What do we say about people in their 90s? Don't buy green bananas, right? You got one foot on a banana peel. We don't expect people in their 90s to live very long. Is that true? Right? You wouldn't expect them to live to 122. Well, she had no family, so she said, sure, I'll do it. He died before she did. He paid for the apartment for 32 years. He died at the age of 72. She's still living. His family's still paying for the apartment. Ends up paying more than double the market value. Now, if you really think about this, think about if your mother, grandmother came to you and said, boy, this lawyer came up to me, he offered to pay me for my apartment, what do you think? How many of us would say, oh, go ahead, do what you want? Hopefully you would. You're like, I don't know, it's a lawyer, he's trying to get away with something, you're 90 years old, how much you think you could die tomorrow? You're not going to get much. And yet she went with it. To me, that's successful aging. So here, some of her other quotes. On her 120th birthday, when asked what kind of future did she expect, she replied, a very short one. Now, she was as sharp as a tack to the day she died, and the only thing was that she lost her sight, and that was why she had to go into a nursing home. So here, when a person took leave, this was a party, took leave by saying, until next year perhaps, she retorted, I don't see why not, you don't look so bad to me. Now, if you really think about it, she was blind, so that even makes this comment even funnier. So I'm going to stop there. I had some stuff about successful aging, but I'm going to stop there. So, oh wait, I got to show you that one. Isn't that, wait. Do that? Self-defining. You get to weigh yourself upside down so you don't have to worry about it. But this is actually age identification reformulated. I came up with this one. Self-defining. I think you should define for yourself, what you did regardless of age. Okay, so Peg, you are up. Yes, you may. Let me get out of here. I get carried away, so, okay. Oh, wait, can I do this one? We got a metaphor here. We got a bear in a bear suit reading a script about how to be a bear. So we have our elders, our older adults. We put them in a wrinkle suit, or whatever kind of suit we put them in, a sick suit. And we give them a script and tell them how they're supposed to be. That whole social construction, the part that really bothers me most is that older adults believe it. They've bought into it. And then we just keep playing that same scene. So part of this talk, and Peg will be carrying it from here, is how are we going to move beyond this? There are two theories. I know Peg's going to be talking about gerotranscendence. She's going to be talking about these. But I want you to notice that gerotranscendence, that is the first non-US theory of aging. It was designed in Denmark. And it actually started in 1998, and he's still working on it, all qualitative. So one of the reasons why people keep looking to us is because we're the ones that came up with all the theories about it. As flawed as they are, we're the only ones with theories about aging, and so they're looking to us in terms of education. Okay, you're on. What do you need? With a lavalier? Can you tell I'm passionate about this field?
Yes.
Right there, all right. Okay, put your pocket.
Take a deep breath.
Okay, right here. Good. Everybody hear me? Good. Marilyn is a tough act to follow, as you may have noticed, but I'm delighted to be here as part of this program. Is this on? Yeah, it's on. Good. I just have to activate it a bit. So I appreciate the invitation to be a part of this series. The title of my book, of course, is facetious. You don't have to learn to be old. But in our culture, there's certain things that people are expected to do or be in late life, as Marilyn has pointed out. So in that sense, we learn to be old. The better meaning of the term, really, is what we can learn to avoid the social stereotypes and avoid the kinds of myths and stereotypes that Marilyn was talking about. So it seems to me that learning to be old is worthwhile. The more we know about the aging process, the better it will be for us. And that's a challenge because a lot of people don't like to think about aging particularly. So I know that some of you have read the book and some of you haven't. So what I thought it would be useful would be to just give a brief synopsis of the chapters in the book, and we can go into more detail in the discussion if you'd like. But I'm not picking this up here. But then I'm going to talk about several other aspects after this kind of run through what's in the book. I'm going to talk about the topics that Marilyn has had up here, something on feminist gerontology, something on the humanities and aging, something on this theory from Denmark, gerotranscendence, and finally, and perhaps of special interest to this audience, is the global issues of aging. How do we see aging in a global context? What are the issues that come up? And this is a fairly new aspect of age studies, and it's coming from not so much mainstream aging, but from people in the areas of critical gerontology, people who are critiquing mainstream ideas in gerontology, and some feminists too are thinking about aging across the globe. I begin this book by looking at the cultural aging, and I think of it as faux anthropology. If I have any anthropologists in the audience, you'll just have to bear with me. But the basic idea here is that we have certain cultural myths in the United States that are really conducive to healthy old age, and others that are not. It's just a different way of thinking of American values. And so I focused on self-reliance as a value that was unhelpful for contented and comfortable aging, because it was something that if we live long enough, we can't be completely self-reliant. But think of what a strong value it is in our culture. People don't like to be helped. Sometimes they don't like to ask for help. I know in our small village of Korea, there are old people I wish would ask for help, but I have to be careful not to offer it until they would request it. So then what might be more positive about our cultural values as far as late life? And then it seemed to me that in America we have a great belief in self-reinvention. It's very different from the situation in Europe, where you are born into a slot and tend to stay there, certainly in England. Not that people don't move, but we have second acts in the United States. We can move across the country. We can get divorced and go to California. We can go back to school in midlife, sometimes in late life. There are countless ways that Americans can reinvent ourselves. And that seemed to me a very useful cultural ideal to carry into late life. We don't have to follow a model or a pattern. We don't have to age the way our parents or grandparents did. And then thinking of reinvention today, reading the sports page, I realized that Tiger Woods is going to be an exemplar now of reinvention, of self-reinvention, because he is in a crisis and he's going to have to figure out a different life phase, a different way of being in public. That may be a frivolous example, but I think it shows the fact that many people are expecting him to undergo this reinvention process. I think means that in our culture that's going to be widely accepted. Another of my interests is the fear of an elder population. Marilyn gave some statistics on how many more people over 65 there's going to be. And for some people that is going to be a disaster. It's been called a tsunami, a tidal wave. It's going to overcome all the rest of us. And this is a way of scapegoating elders. This is a way of saying they're different from us, they're the other, there's this group over here who threatens all the rest of us. And the upshot here is that our economic health in the United States will depend on multiple factors. It won't depend just on the fact that we have lots of people getting Social Security or Medicare. Those scare tactics, by the way, tend to come from conservatives who have written books about the age wave or the coming disaster, the iceberg. That's on a cover on one of the books is an iceberg, and this is what's looming for Americans as our population grows older. I'm also interested in social roles for older people, the traditional ones and some other ones. And an anthropologist from California who was one of the founders of medical anthropology, Margaret Clark is her name, she said the social role of old people in the United States is to be sick, which was, she said that 25 years ago, and it seems to me even more apt now because of the growth of biomedicine and the very dominant role that medicine plays in our culture. Obviously, there's other social roles. People are volunteers. People are grandparenting, for example. People take on various service roles. But the idea here of examining the sick role is to think how people in a society which has such a high profile for medicine and illness and sickness, how people might be encouraged to take on that role almost unconsciously, because it's a way of getting attention, it's a way of occupying a lot of time, it's a way of being old in a social role that may not be necessarily, that may be encouraged by society rather than by the individual needs. I have a chapter in the book called Over-Drugging the Elder Population. Actually, my editor changed it to Over-Medicating the Elder Population. She said, over-drugging sounds too bad. That sounds too extreme. So I took care in the chapter itself to use over-drugging instead of over-medicating. And the main thing I want to tell you about this is that when I originally wrote this chapter, I couldn't get it presented at gerontological conferences. They said, oh, you know, this isn't really scientific. However, those conferences are paid for by the drug companies, of course, but a group called the Western Social Science Association said, yeah, come on, give this paper, we'd be interested. Well, they put it the last day of the conference and only a handful of people came. But this is about 8 or 9 years ago. Now, mainstream writers, people from inside the medical establishment, have written very damning books about the drug industry. You may have seen some of the reviews. Marcia Angel, who used to be the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, wrote a scathing attack, all the corruption, all the ways that medical research on drugs that purports to be objective is not. And maybe less well known is a book called Hooked by Hugh Brody, who's a medical professor of medicine at University of Texas. Very parallel, very similar books. So now this message that seemed kind of countercultural 10 years ago, that older Americans were taking far too many drugs. This point of view has now become much more widespread in mainstream thinking, and it doesn't mean that we've stopped offering 10, 12, 15 drugs to the same elder, but I think the critique of that and the examination of that. So it's really important that people reevaluate what they're on. If possible, have a geriatrician look at the drug use and think of drugs maybe for shorter terms rather than for indefinite periods. In a chapter on healthy aging, I'm looking at, for example, the emotions, the role the emotions play in late life health. And there's quite a lengthy discussion of alternative health care for maintaining ourselves after age 65 or 70. There's a class bias here, of course, because such things as acupuncture and massage and nutrition counseling and chiropractic. I guess chiropractic is covered now by Medicare. But if you're white and middle class and have disposable income, you can be healthy by choosing an array of alternative medical practices in addition to whatever mainstream practice that you are involved in. The good news, I think, in healthy aging is research on the telomeres, and I have a little description here. Telomeres, bits of simple repetitive DNA sequences at the ends of chromosomes. They were formerly thought to be biological junk, but now they have been shown to prolong the life of cells. The longer the telomere, the longer the cell life. And the enzyme connected to this is telomerase. Now, you may have read about the Nobel Prize winners, the two women who won the Nobel Prize in medicine just this year. This is their research on telomeres, and it's I think it holds a lot of promise for healthy aging. Also, of course, stem cell research, if some organs can be rebuilt, if some declining functions can be helped by the future research on stem cells, that would be very important. There's a section in here on inequality in aging. I just mentioned the class bias or the class privilege needed to be heavily using alternative medicine. The mainstream gerontology has often overlooked the fact that one predictor of health in late life, maybe the biggest predictor, is your social class. And that's hard for us as Americans really to confront that, because we like to think that we have fewer class divisions than in other countries. But you know, the gap between wealthy and poor is increasing in the United States. It's very dramatically increasing. And the implication for aging, I think, is that poor people, people of color, are not going to be doing as well, as white middle-class people. You can see it in the longevity statistics. It really depends a lot on your group and where you live. Native Americans in South Dakota, for example, much lower life expectancy than the average in America, or black men living in Washington, D.C. White women living in Stearns County, Minnesota, my home state, have a life expectancy of 85 years. It's the German farm families there that tended to be very healthy. I have a long chapter on ageism because there's a lot to say about ageism, and one of the questions I raise is it like racism or class bias or sexism or homophobia, or is it different? We could talk about that if you like. Of particular interest, I think, is the problem of internalized ageism. Marilyn was talking about those messages that people internalize and think they have to be a particular way, like the woman whose daughter had internalized ageism by thinking that her mother, because of a number, couldn't do something that the mother was capable of doing. There's a lot of really ugly, degrading, demeaning jokes about old people that are popular in our society, and there are many groups we are no longer making fun of, thank goodness. But mother-in-law jokes or jokes about being old, they seem to be fairly common. So one way to raise consciousness might be to gently nudge a friend who tells you a joke in which, I'm not talking just about humorous references to our aging bodies, but contempt for being old in the form of humor. I also think, pay some attention in the book to the pressure to stay busy in late life. We're a society that values productivity, and if we were to say to someone who asks what we're doing in retirement that we were sitting on the couch or looking out the window, there would be some consternation because we're expected to be at least active. And there's a difference between being active, of course, and being busy. But I think it's a trap. I know people, for example, in their later years who are really, really very busy and haven't really taken time perhaps to ask if all those activities are really what they want to do, or if they think they ought to be doing all of that. Now, some comment on feminist gerontology. The word geron means old man in Greek. The word for old women, well, geras, hard G in Greek, would be geras, G-E-R-A-S, old women. So I have proposed facetiously in my book that we change the title of gerontology to gerastology, because who are the population over 85? 3/4 of the people over 85, of course, are women. Well, this is definitely a minority point of view. My terminology has not caught on, certainly not in Merriam-Webster. Feminists have been important, I think, for noting the areas of aging research that are male-centered. Studies, for example, of human development tend to have a male model. They don't seem to have a room for going back to school when you are in midlife, for example. And I'm thinking of Erik Erikson or Daniel Levinson from Harvard. He got a lot of acclaim for his life stage research, which is good research. It just happens to take men as the model rather than women. Feminist gerontology has called a lot of attention to people of color. The issues of women of color particularly have not been front and center in gerontology. The group that Marilyn's president of, I think, has done a much better job than some of the bigger aging organizations in seeing the rainbow colors of old Americans, not just white people. It's also been feminist gerontology interested in including lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender elders, who are a growing group now, I think, as far as the research they've done on themselves and the attention that people in this group are calling to the ways they want to be treated in nursing homes, for example. Do they feel welcome at senior centers? There's a lot of issues related to LGBT issues that are worth addressing. On a little more theoretical note, feminist gerontologists have said that dualism is a problem that we have in understanding late life. If we think of it in sharp terms, for example, premenopausal and postmenopausal, these categories are not necessarily useful for individuals. And think of black-white. Well, that excludes or tends to Asian Americans, Native Americans, for example, Muslims, people who are not part of the dualism that has been set up. And of course, with old and youth, young and old, we know which group is favored and which group isn't favored. So the problem with dualism often is that there's an implied superiority, inferiority bias built in. Finally, feminist gerontologists are beginning to consider appearance as an issue for old women. They've done some interesting studies asking older women how they feel about the way they look. This is just in the last few years that these studies have been published, and the results are mixed. Some women are very comfortable not changing their appearance when they're older. One group of researchers in Canada, the old women in the study considered natural aging changes you make to yourself that people don't notice you've made. That's natural aging. So your Botox is very high tech, and nobody would be able to tell. But this is an important issue because of the disparagement of old women's bodies. The fact that we don't have many images in our society of vital old women, of a variety of body shapes and types and levels of vitality and energy. Now, Marilyn mentioned gerotranscendence. This is a theory that's fairly new, and the scholar Lars Tornström coined this word to describe a late stage in our maturation in which we, old people, exhibit less fear of death, less materialism, less self-centeredness, more selectivity in friendships, new self-knowledge, an ability to see patterns in our lives, and a heightened spiritual awareness. These are very thoughtful ways of approaching late life. He did this research by questionnaire rather than interview, and it seems to me that, suggestive as these are, interviews with people might have fine-tuned these a bit. The research was done in Sweden and Denmark. But in the discussion group, I'd like to find out if you think that's accurate, or based on your own experience, the people you know, if these characteristics would be, I think he says universal with old age, probably not quite universal. And then how applicable would this idea be to other cultures besides Europe and the United States? Another issue that's really important and neglected is the role of the humanities in aging. If the media wants to get an opinion about an old age subject, they would call a doctor, maybe a sociologist. I suppose they'd call Marilyn too. But people who are writers or artists don't get those telephone calls from the media saying, what's your view? So all the aspects of aging involving what does it mean to grow old? What does it mean to grow old in this particular society with some pretty strong prejudices against old people? So the point here is to encourage more literary images of old people and more visual images. These don't have to be necessarily rosy or even positive, just real, just depictions of people who are, whom we can identify with. There's some wonderful short novels about old women characters, powerful women characters. There's a discussion too in the humanities about age as an identity. Is being old like being black or being female, or being Native American? Again, we can look at that if you're interested. But the main point I want to make about the humanities and aging is that we need to balance the medical aspects of aging, the social sciences, the medical, the measurable parts of aging, the things we know because we can count and study, with the humanistic approach, with all the questions about values and meanings. For example, how do people in other cultures do aging? How are they thinking and feeling about aging? What comparisons and contrasts can we make to our own society? Finally, a few words on global issues. How am I doing? I have a little more time. Good, good. Global issues. As I mentioned before, these have fairly recently entered gerontological discourse and writing and thinking about aging. We've tended to have a very specific focus, I think, on America. One of the big issues is that some people will be growing old in a country that's not the country they grew up in. So they will be aging, in a sense, in two cultures. They may have the cultural values of their native place as a foundation for how they think about aging and how it unfolds for them, and then the cultural values of the new place. There was some research on Southern California of Latinas who came up to Southern California to join their families. And people like me would think, oh good, the wise elder in the family. Not so. These people who came up, the women particularly, the grandmothers, turned out to be servants in these families. They did all the childcare, all the cooking, all the cleaning, and they didn't have time to get outside the home, and they didn't have an opportunity to learn English. So they were really isolated, and this is the kind of global aging issue I think that is worth thinking about. They came from Central America, most of them. They came to, or Mexico, and they came to Southern California, where presumably they will live out their lives. This is an important issue, I think, because the economists tell us that an increasing number of Latinos and Latinas will be moving to the United States and aging here. So just from an economic point of view, it's interesting to think of aging nationally there. A big problem is that American attitudes towards aging don't travel very well, or they could. And as Marilyn pointed out, we're in the position of being looked to by other countries. At the same time, the way we've organized aging in this country may be very specific to the United States. Here's an example. There was a gerontologist at UC Berkeley who went to India to study aging, and he discovered that Meals on Wheels in Calcutta was being used only by well-off people. It hadn't gotten to the poor people. And also, he ran into people in India who would say, "What's a senior?" So we can't assume that the way we organize it here is going to be useful in other places. Some gerontologists have said, for example, that our emphasis on individualism isn't going to travel well to aging practices in other countries. Even our capitalistic ideas may be quite abhorrent to people in other societies. So to the extent that we have our aging occurring in capitalistic society may not be, our models don't fit particularly. And this is important partly because of the attention in the academic world now to post-colonialism, to trying to outgrow the attitudes that led people who were in the dominant powers to think they knew what was best for the countries they were subjugating or the countries whose natural resources they were stripping away. So the notion that our aging models might be exported, I think, would have to be scrutinized in the light of colonization and cultural imperialism and sensitivity to not assuming that that we know best. The last point here I'd like to make is about the pharmaceutical industry. You can imagine that there are emerging markets for the drug industries in the countries of the world as they get some of them a little more prosperous and begin to be heavy consumers of drugs. I hope they won't be, but this is an example, I think, where the American model would be very unwise for other countries. A student of mine from Japan told me, for example, that in her country, it's very rare for a person to be on more than 4 medications, an elderly person. She would consider that unusual. And think of the difference here, for example. So if I'm a pharmaceutical industry executive, I would like the Japanese to become more American and use many more prescription drugs so that the markets there, you see the open markets for for the product. I think that's probably something to be concerned about. So I conclude simply by saying that with aging and learning to be old and resisting the social constructions, it's important to be mindful when people make a joke that puts people down, or to be mindful when the doctor says, what can you expect? You're 85. Of course you're going to be having these problems. And I think the mass media does not a very good job of portraying, perhaps not a good job at all, the tremendous numbers of old people in this country who are healthy, who are not being seen by medical people because they are healthy. And we don't have a lot of images of all the different activities they're involved in, all their different points of view about being the age they are. There's just a whole world there, invisible so far, I think, of really healthy old people. And by healthy, for example, you could be in a wheelchair and be a healthy old person. I don't want to limit this necessarily to able-bodied people. So awareness of all the factors that influence our aging, besides what happens to us physically. Awareness that aside from that our physical bodies are aging in a particular cultural context, at a particular time and place. And a lot of the things going on in the larger world, the economics, the politics, the media images, all the rest will influence very much how we age. Think of supermarket food, for example. We don't control what's on the shelves of the supermarket, but the level of health we have in old age may depend partly on our access to really healthy food. That's my part.
I'm aware of time. If you want, we can just talk out at the reception, or if we want to take a question or two.
Please do, yeah. If you have any questions, we still have some time in other receptions.
Thank you.
Thank you all for hanging in there with us. Are you thinking a little differently? A little differently? Good for you.
I have a question about the lower end of the healthcare that our seniors or the older folks are getting in nursing homes and whatnot. And in particular, and I loved your book, but right off the bat, talking about CNAs and
Certified nursing assistant?
Yep, certified nursing assistants. And proposing as a solution, perhaps, since a lot of those people now are immigrants and are non-English speaking, having been a CNA and worked with older folks for a long time, and knowing the importance of that role, not just as a friend to the elderly, but also as an information provider, because they are the people that spend most of the time with the elderly and can report on what's going on with them. They assure that they're being cared for well, that they don't get the ulcers and things along those lines. The problem that I see is that it's not a well-paying job. It's a very physically demanding job. And it really needs to change, I think, because you see a lot of people that are on their way to being a nurse that start out as a CNA for experience. But I have many friends that have done this for decades, and they're the most loving, compassionate people, and they're barely scraping by. And it's just not even understood how important that role is. And when I see that the trend may be that we'll need to provide English as a second language lessons for people that provide this care to these older folks that really become good friends with these people, it's really disrespectful to them, I think, that they're going to be having to deal with the people that they deal with most and not even being able to communicate with them. So I guess my question is, do you see any changes on the bottom half of the healthcare providers going forward? And also, there again, you're going to need many more doctors, as you say, but for every doctor that you're going to need to take care of so many people, you're going to need more of the certified nursing assistants.
And the certified nursing assistants are at minimum wage and oftentimes no benefits whatsoever. And in every case of medical students that have lived in a nursing home, every one of them said the most important staff person in the nursing home was the CNA, which once they become physicians, I think is incredibly important. Are you familiar with the Institute of Medicine report, Retooling for an Aging America? It's, you can get onto the Institute of Medicine website and find that that committee was chaired by Dr. Jack Rowe. He actually wrote the book Successful Aging. They address the direct care staff in the Institute of Medicine report to create change. There is a group that I'm part of in Maine, and we are a cultural change group. What we're trying to do is change how the regulators are looking at nursing homes so we can create more culture change in nursing homes and do more for direct care staff. So there are these pockets of information that's happening in terms of the hands-on stuff. I will let Peg talk about it more broad-minded.
In my book, I propose that ESL classes be taught in nursing homes. And one of the benefits that occurred to me would be that as the CNAs practice their English, they can learn the life stories of the residents.
Yes.
So that there could be an ongoing
Did we do you in?
benefit. But I think programs wouldn't have to have a huge bureaucracy if we could find ESL programs that were willing to go to a nursing home and then another and then another. I think it could happen somewhat informally.
We just lost her.
I'm sorry.
You want to hold your thought, and then we'll go to a next question.
go to
And then
the
if you
next
want to
question.
come,
Go to the
just
next
give her a chance to. Any other questions?
This is actually not a question, but it's just my favorite story about reinventing yourself. And my uncle, when he was 68, he'd been a lifelong drinker and smoker, and when he was 68, he read a newspaper article that said that all the cells in your body are replaced every 7 years. So he stopped drinking and stopped smoking and committed himself to a healthy lifestyle. When he was 75, he became the world champion race walker for those people who are 75 and older.
That is a great story. It's the best kind of reinvention,
Yeah.
from poor health to excellent health.
Anything else?
Well, I don't really have a question, but I'm recalling a seminar that I took years ago on stress and disease, and they the instructor had a list of heart failure contributors, and the number one contributor to heart failure and heart attacks was, of course, smoking, and number two was lack of social support. Number 4 was high cholesterol and being overweight. I was really surprised by that. And one of my friends has a joke that he always says, "I believe I'm going to die at the age of 97, killed by a jealous husband."
You heard about the 98-year-old that just killed her roommate, right? Go ahead.
Now that I feel totally guilty about yelling at my father, who's 85, for going on his roof and cleaning his gutters by hanging over the edge.
That's different. That's different. Don't let him.
I'm definitely going to encourage them to watch this on the web now. But I think that the problem I see in the future is you encourage, or as I get older and I see my children, I'm going to want to have my lifestyle, but looking on if there is an injury, in which case more responsibility will turn over to the younger person, and is that being looked at as I know in their case that they take medication because he's been scared and that he might have a stroke if he doesn't.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to be a burden on his children. And how do you iron all of that out in between the generations, and especially as generations live further and further apart?
Well, one of the biggest issues is that whole emotional piece. That it's very different. If it was your neighbor's dad that was hanging off the house, you probably wouldn't be as affected. You might be more objective about it. But once you have these family dynamics going on, that makes it really tough. My administrative assistant was talking with me about her mother, her aging mother, and I said, let's be clear here. This is not about your mother being older. This is a family dynamic that you've had for your whole life probably. And she's like, you're right, it's true. You know, so you got to be clear about what's happening within the family dynamic and then what's happening because of, you know, the person aging and what's going on. One of the things that I did with my mother was when she chose to do something and that decision affected me, I said, just so you know, that decision affects me. And can we talk about this? So communication is, it sounds, you know, I'm simplifying it by saying communication is key. But if you really think about it, do you think you're really going to be any different in terms of your personality and what you're about and what drives you when you're older than who you are now or who you were when you were 20 or 30? I mean, you know, we're all like incredible people and we're individuals and we have so much to offer. And why is it that our society thinks that as soon as you get white hair or wrinkled skin that all of a sudden things change? Your personality is not going to change. So how are you going to work with that and maneuver that with the people around you, with your children, with your dad? It's a tricky thing. I obviously don't know the answer to that question. Peg?
I would just say it depends so much on the individual and the individual situation that a family in that situation would have to be inventive and creative and not be overly influenced by comparable situations that they know about or their family or their neighbors. It depends on the individual. It really does.
You got to listen with your heart, though. Absolutely. And you think about how co-opted we are by society. It's hard to listen with an open heart and mind. We're expecting bad things.
I've also been a CNA I was a CNA for about 6 years, and my least favorite thing was conversations over a resident that was living there about boyfriends or what you're going to eat tonight at home. And it makes me think about home, and that a nursing home to me is not a home, it's more an institution. And we used to do the same thing with the population that were individuals with mentally, I don't know the correct term, individuals with developmental disabilities.
Okay.
I'm sure that's not politically correct right now, but they used to be institutionalized as a separate population, and now we have group homes. And I'm working as a CRMA in a group home where I feel much more like I'm a part of a community that's worthwhile. Is there a possibility of doing that in the future here in America at least?
Mm-hmm. It's already happening. I don't know if you're familiar with William Thomas. He started, he's actually the person that started Greenhouse. He's a geriatrician. So if you put up William Thomas, MD, greenhouses, you'll find that out. They are actually creating family atmosphere, kitchens right out in the living area where people are cooking with the older adults in the home. Usually have between 15, 20 older adults in the home, fireplace, you know, just a more home environment. It is very challenging for the nursing homes that appear institutionalized to create that home-like environment. What's been interesting to me with the medical students living in these nursing homes is that the ones that I think look the most archaic or institutionalized, they tend to be the ones that have the highest level of community. And it's community that the students respond to with the residents rather than the environment itself. So I was actually heartened by that.
Here's a note on another one. This is called the Greenhouse Project in Tupelo, Mississippi, designed by Richard McCarty, features 8 to 10 residents in private rooms with a common kitchen. The emphasis is on sunlight and accessible outdoor space. And it says 100 nursing homes in the United States are converting. Now, this is maybe more by now.
Yeah.
But this seems to address your point about the hominess of the smaller numbers and
It's incremental, it's little, but we're trying. We're trying.
I'm curious I'll be excited to see if that's actually, if it really happens in America, because we're not allowed to treat people in a certain way as a younger population, but we are allowed, it seems, to treat an older population that way. I'd like to see that be illegal.
Yeah, look at William Thomas, and he actually started the Eden Alternative, where they have plants and pets in nursing homes, but he really moved along with the greenhouses and also changing emergency rooms. He worked on an emergency room in Maryland.
also the residents make decisions too. Now, about half the residents of nursing homes we know have dementia, so this is not an ideal solution. But those who don't, then his project encourages them to have some decision-making power about the whole place, because he said boredom and loneliness are the two big drawbacks of institutionalized aging.
Okay, so we're done.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
I just want to
Thank
thank
you.
Marilyn and Margaret. Thank you so much for a wonderful evening. It's got to be one of the most exciting evenings we've had.